come out on an afternoon like this that I trudged through the pouring rain too and managed to tiptoe through the torrential downpour to get here without someone too wet. So thank you and good afternoon everyone. We are so happy to have this beautiful concert today. And we are short of programs, but we are going to post a full program on our Facebook page. And maybe with a little tweaking, I can get it out in emails too. So we will have it. But Naomi's going to announce the pieces as they're played, so you'll know what is being performed. And this is a lovely tribute to Naomi's friend, Suzanne Bagley, who died from cancer. Sorry about that. This concert is dedicated to Suzanne Bagley, who is Naomi's friend. And her mom is here today, and I believe her brother. So it's very sweet to be able to have a memorial such as this and to enjoy a lovely afternoon of music. After the concert, we can go downstairs. We'll have a reception, and you will get to see and enjoy Naomi's jewelry, her artwork that she has done in fused glass. And some of us are wearing her pieces, so you have to look out, check everybody's necklaces out, ask them where they got it, because I made this in the class, and I believe I got this from Naomi. So she has some lovely, lovely work. And we will be having a workshop here on 7/24 if you're at all interested. So we'll have a lovely reception afterwards. We got some wine and some snacks for everyone. So without further ado, I hope you will all enjoy.
The gates will close except for this one.
Oh, the gates, yes. When you leave the cemetery, if you're driving out, you have to drive out this gate next to the building because it's late in the day and the cemetery does close at 6 o'clock. So, not for us, we can have it open as long as we wish, but just to get out from that gate. So don't get stuck driving around the cemetery wondering where you can go. It's right here. And don't forget to turn off your cell phones, make them silent, as I just did, so we don't interrupt the beautiful music. And one more thing, the restrooms are on the lower level for those who haven't been here before. They're at the far corner on the left as you go down. You can either take the elevator or walk down the stairs. Thank you so much. Enjoy the program.
Okay, is this thing on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay. Yeah, Judith is my makeup wizard here.
I don't know if I'm a wizard, but talk to me, doll.
All right, is this on now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I was not expecting there to be a monsoon today, so I appreciate you all braving the weather to come here, and it's great to see friends and family and some students. Some students have become friends. I just appreciate everyone being here today. And I'm going to be playing a program of different types of French music that's dedicated to my friend Suzanne Bagley. One of the things that I really like about the cemetery is that whenever they do these programs, they usually dedicate them to somebody or somebodies who've been buried here. And in this case, this is the first time that I actually know the person who we're dedicating this to. And I've been looking for an opportunity to do something that's in her honor. It's kind of interesting how this all came together. So my husband John and I have lived in Kew Gardens since 2001. So we've been here a very long time. And obviously we knew that the cemetery was here because we see it right on top of the hill. But what I didn't know was that they have this whole art and cultural center attached to it, because who would think that? Who would think that they have all these concerts in a cemetery of all places? But in 2016, I was in the middle of taking some jewelry classes. I'd been let go from my job at Soap Opera Digest, and I was busy taking some classes, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and started volunteering at the Atria Kew Gardens, which is around the corner from me. I was playing flute there. And my friend Judith, who will be playing with me later, she's the one who just set up the mic for me. She was wearing one of my pieces that she bought. Helen came to do a lecture, noticed the piece, and was like, you know, we do art classes up at the cemetery. Meanwhile, I lived in town for 15 years already, and I was like, wait a minute, what? And that's how my teaching career began, because Helen recruited me. She, I said yes when she gave me this kind of strange offer. And after that, I learned that there were music programs here, and what was kind of interesting too was I took a walk around the cemetery just to kind of get a lay of the land, and took some pictures, posted them on Facebook, and Suzanne's mom, Genevieve, was like, Suzanne is buried there. And I was like, wait a minute, why? And Suzanne was a very proud Brooklynite. Aside from being proud of her French heritage, she was also very proud of having come from Brooklyn. So I wouldn't have expected her to see her in this kind of little cemetery in the middle of Queens. But she's here, and it's really nice to kind of have her close by. And I'm very happy that I get to do something in her honor today. So throughout the program, I'm going to be sharing some stories about Suzanne and who she was as a person, so you guys can get to know her too. Now, the first piece that I'm playing is a solo piece by Debussy called The Syrinx. And this piece is actually the first solo piece that was written for the modern flute. This is the modern flute. It's called a Bohème flute, which was designed by Theobald Bohème. And the piece came out at the turn of last century, but it actually has kind of a jazzy flow to it. So it's really quite modern. So it's a modern solo piece for a modern flute. So this is the Syrinx. That I'm going to be playing are from Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns. And the first one I'm doing is a piece that I really like. It's March of the Royal Lion, which when I first decided to play it, I was thinking, well, this is kind of a funny song to play on the flute because it's a lion and the flute is a little instrument. And I have this thing where I like to turn anything into a flute song. If you look at my YouTube channel, I play all sorts of rock music. I've done Led Zeppelin, and I've done AC/DC. I've done all kinds of interesting things, and I kind of like to turn anything into it. So that was my challenge with this. But then as time went on, I was thinking that this is actually a really appropriate song for Suzanne. She was a very small person in stature, but she had a very big spirit. She spent her life with an autoimmune disease, and she just didn't let that break her. she still went ahead and did so many things. She lived in France for a while. She was very active. And one story that shows the type of character she has is when I broke my leg back in 2010. She had spent her life in and out of hospitals, including when she was a kid. And meanwhile, I broke my leg, which was a big deal for me. And I had to get surgery. I still have a plate in my leg. And I was kind of a big baby about it. I was nervous. And she was extremely comforting to me. And she actually came to the hospital. Like I said before, she was from Brooklyn. And my operation was at night. So she came out on a weeknight all the way out to Brooklyn. It was probably like a 2-hour trip for her. She came out by herself and stayed with my family and kept them comforted, kept them calm. And she was there the whole time for me, and then went back. They let me home like around midnight or so, and she was there with me the entire time. Meanwhile, you know, she'd been through a lot more trauma herself, but she wanted to be there to comfort me because that's the type of friend she was. So even though she might have been small in size, she had a big will, much like the lion. So here is Royal March of the Lion from Carnival of the Animals. The Swan, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's a much slower piece, probably more appropriate for the flute, though I like the lion. That song also brought to mind for me how much Suzanne enjoyed Broadway shows. That's something that we did together, and one of my last memories of her was for her 40th birthday, we went to go see The Lion King together. And we also went to this French restaurant that's in Midtown called Marseille, which she really liked. And we just had a great time. She spoke fluent French. Meanwhile, I studied French in high school, and the first time that we met through our mutual friend Terry, and she mentioned that she lived in France, that she spoke French, I was like, oh, you know, I took French in high school, and she started very excitedly chattering away at me in French, and I had to stop her, and I'm like, wait a minute, I said that I studied French. I didn't say that I actually speak French. So that became a joke with us, but her Broadway arts, it was always a passion for her, and she was always very supportive of all my ventures, all of her friends' ventures really, when they were involved in the arts. She was just always there for us. And I think now she's kind of smiling and is sort of like, yeah, it's so like you, Naomi, to have this whole music set up in a cemetery. I think she'd really get a kick out of that. So next piece, this is the Swan from Camille Saint-Saëns from Carnival of the Animals. live backup with my friend Judith Lyman. So the next series of songs that we're going to be playing, this is some French jazz. So picture yourself at the left bank. You're at a cafe eating a croissant. There's a cappuccino, there's a mime, you know, the one doing this thing with the box.
A mime is a terrible thing to waste.
There you go. And I'm going to share another story about Suzanne. So Suzanne was actually with me the last time that I saw my grandmother Esther alive. I don't even know if you guys know this story, but we were going to a party at one of our friends' houses, and we happened to have a car that weekend. So I told Suzanne, well, we'll drive you, but do you mind if we stop and visit my grandmother on the way? She's in the hospital on Kings Highway. And being Suzanne, she was like, no, not at all. And I said, I can't promise what my grandmother's going to be like, because it was challenging, especially toward the end, as is often the case. And when we got there, my grandmother at first was not in the greatest mood, but she always really enjoyed meeting my friends. And she warmed up to Suzanne. And we actually managed to have a really good conversation that day. I don't even remember what they were talking about. Maybe they were talking about places in Brooklyn. I honestly don't remember, but I remember my grandmother turned to me with a smile and said, I like her, she's nice. And That was really great because it was my last time seeing my grandmother. She died a couple of weeks later, and Suzanne, you know, she gave that to me. So that's something that I always take with me. And so we're going to be playing some French jazz now. And the first piece that we're going to be doing is La Vie en Rose by Edith Piaf. 1, 2, ready, go. Now, the next piece that we're going to be playing is Autumn Leaves. Most of you have probably heard this, and what's interesting about this is that it started out as a French tune with French lyrics, but over time it ended up becoming an American jazz standard. And then when Judith and I were playing it, somehow it kind of took on a Latin flavor. So this is truly an international piece. So here is Autumn Leaves.
Sing sound.
Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. playing is really not French, but it's kind of peripherally French. This is Michelle by the Beatles. And really, I just kind of look for any excuse to throw the Beatles into a concert because I like them and Judith is also a big fan. So that's why Michelle is here. But it's actually sort of an interesting song about how French is often incorporated into some more mainstream international pieces. Like you have Lady Marmalade, which is just so not appropriate for this program, but you have pieces like that. So this is Michelle with the phrase, the one French phrase that everybody learned by the Beatles. Jazz. And this is Minor Swing by Django Reinhardt. And while my three guitarists are getting set up here, because I got a whole orchestra behind me now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Django and another story about Suzanne. So Django Reinhardt was an interesting guy. He was Romani, or Gypsy as they're sometimes known, and he was in France around the time that Europe was being occupied by the Nazis, and yet he was very popular with everybody. And at one point he was almost caught by the Nazis, but the person who caught him happened to be a fan of his and let him go. And meanwhile, he lost several fingers in an accident, and he had to learn how to play the guitar with what, was it 3 fingers? Yeah, he had to relearn the guitar for 3 fingers. and yet somehow he does these wild and crazy tunes. And I'm going to be kind of filling in for fiddle today. So the part that I'm doing is an improv that was done by his violinist or fiddle player. And just hearing about how Django overcame some hardships is another example of just how Suzanne was, where she was knocked down many times, but her mantra was to always say yes as long as she felt she was able to do something. And one of my favorite memories is when she went camping with us at Lackland Lake up in upstate New York by the Adirondacks. She went with me and our friend Amy and Amy's friend Michelle, and she'd been very nervous about going because she was worried, you know, what if I get sick up there, what do I do? And I said, well, we're not going to be camping, we're going to be glamping. We're in a fully furnished cabin, they have a phone up there, there's a lake, it'll be really nice. So she agreed to come with us, and we just had an amazing women's weekend away. And she was very active that weekend. We went for a hike in the woods, and she made fun of me because I call the frog Sweetie, because that's what I do with animals, I call all animals Sweetie. When we went out to the lake, she was swimming, she was kayaking. She was doing more than the rest of us were. We were like on the beach relaxing and reading, and she was busy like rowing and kayaking and swimming and just having a great old time. And then at night, my friend Amy and I were having a rabbinical debate over what constitutes a s'more. Whether or not it counts as a s'more if you have a Teddy Graham or a chocolate chip cookie as the cookie base. And we were arguing about this. And Suzanne was kind of pretending to be frustrated, and I have this video of her like pretending to get mad, but she's like really trying not to laugh because we were being so ridiculous. And that's how I like to think of her, as just being out on the lake and being with her friends and laughing and enjoying life the best that she could. So in her honor, here is Minor Swing by Django Reinhardt, someone who also had to overcome some hardships. 1, 2, ready, go. Yeah, this is why they have tech crews in Broadway theater. I gotta be my own tech crew today. But the next couple of pieces that I'm going to be playing are two beautiful songs about the French Revolution. And this is from the musical Les Mis, which is one of my favorite musicals. And like I said, Suzanne was a big lover of musicals. Hold on, let me just adjust this mic here. Like I said, one person tech crew. One of the other places that we went to go see Annie many years ago with a bunch of friends, and we had a great time. And Suzanne could seem very quiet and reserved, but when you got her in the right mood, she could really open up, and she really just liked to have fun. And we'd sometimes go for karaoke. And the song that she always sang for karaoke was Castle on a Cloud. So that was her song. She had kind of a high-pitched voice, and it's a soprano song, so she always liked to sing that. And she was just always a lot of fun to be around. So when I think about musicals, and I think about these songs from Les Mis, I think about her. After we saw The Lion King, she actually wrote me a really nice postcard. And I hung it on my fridge. And somebody had given me a magnet that looked like a bag of baguettes, and it says France on it. I don't even remember for sure who gave me this. I think it might have been my cousin who has lived in France. And I put that baguette onto her card that she sent me just to remind me of her. And she was still alive when I did this, and she was very amused that I put French baguettes on her card. But it seemed appropriate, and that card is still up there today. So first we're going to be playing a really beautiful song. This is from Les Mis. This is On My Own. I have Toshiko Jones on the piano. friend Susan, who is also a close friend of Suzanne, her daughter Vicky was supposed to sing today, but Vicky has been performing at Newsstand, and she recently did a Gershwin show, and because of that, she ended up losing her voice. So Castle on a Cloud is going to be instrumental. And before you sit down, do you want to say a couple words about Suzanne? Okay.
It's great to be here, and I want to thank Naomi for inviting me and Victoria. Unfortunately, can't be here today to add our contribution to this great musical program. I didn't know Suzanne as well as Naomi did, but as long as she did, I should say. But we quickly became friends. It was very easy to talk to her. I found her very down to earth and very caring, and I enjoyed having lunch with her and getting together with her, with other of our mutual friends. And I know that one of the things that she loved the most was helping children, and when my son, who's now 18, was a baby, she noticed some things that were a little unusual. She said, you probably should check with the pediatrician about that. And when he had some behavioral challenges in kindergarten, I hired her as a parent advocate to help me advocate for his needs at the school where he was at. And she didn't take no for an answer. She stood her ground in the meeting with the principal and held the administration accountable to do everything possible to give him the chance to succeed. And I also wanted to say that it's funny, in these days leading up to this concert, I've been encountering things that are French, and I feel that Suzanne's presence is kind of here, that she kind of knows that we're doing this. Even today, it was pouring right before 4 o'clock, and 2 minutes before the sun came out. I stopped, as I was driving back from Cape Cod, I passed by a French bakery in the middle of this little country road, thought of Suzanne. And yesterday I was at a sunflower festival in Long Island, and there was a sign that said the French word for sunflower is tournesol, and the meaning of tournesol is turn toward the sun. And I felt that Suzanne was always someone that turned toward the sun in her life and found reasons to help and be happy no matter how dark the clouds were around her.
Suzanne, and I'm going to be playing music with her. And for years, Susan has been publishing her poems, and I've obviously been doing my music. And just this past year, we were like, you know what, we should collaborate. And when this came up, I asked her to write a poem for me so I could play some music along to it. So this is our first composition together. And I'm going to let Susan take the mic again.
The poem that I wrote for Suzanne is called Beauty is Built from the points that ache. And there's an epigraph by the poet Bruce Deathlefson. How dare you dream you could stop loving someone just because they stopped living. When you crack open a broken body, it still leaks light. That's where the treasure lies, grief, brush blue and sparkling. The sky sings. There's no space for dissatisfaction without its sister, sweetness. And it's right. How much sweeter your world became in the French countryside, elevated to new heights in the hills of Bar-le-Duc City in Lorraine, where you spent your childhood summers visiting your grand-mère and grand-père with your brothers, Nicolas and Olivier. Your spirit was as bright and fierce as the wood violets and wild daffodils that grew there. And this fighting spirit guided you through every challenge life threw your way. La résilience, no mountain insurmountable. Even a broken body could not stop you, pry you away from the life that you wanted to live. In the end, your struggles became your gifts, and your purpose unfolded, burning the darkness. You offered love and protection to every child you met or knew, your students, your friends' children, and your dear nieces and nephews. Ça alors, you used to say. My goodness, everything a surprise, or an opening to love. How you connected with the youngest among us, and bonded with your mother, also a teacher, with a beautiful thread not unlike silk. On the surface, silk seems so thin and fragile, but it's one of the strongest natural fibers. As a material, it can build a world. Sew it together so it's stronger, less likely to break.
Yeah, like I said before, Suzanne was always very supportive of anything that we did in the arts. One of the more amusing stories was when I wrote my first book, Revenge of a Band Geek Gone Bad. You know, I'd given out some copies to friends, and we were at a friend's birthday party, and we were just waiting for our food to be served, and she said to me, you know, I read your book and I really enjoyed it. And she told me some of the things that she liked about it, and then she was like, you know, I don't really read a lot of young adult fiction, and the only other person that I read who you remind me of was this friend of mine. And I was like, oh, who's your friend? Is it somebody who I've heard of? And she said, Ned Vizzini. And I was like, wait, what? Ned Vizzini? You know Ned Vizzini? He was a very well-known young adult author. He wrote one book called Be More Chill, which ended up being a musical on Broadway a few years ago. And he was like an author wonderkind who was first published when he was like 15 in a magazine or something like that. And she happened to know him from church because he was also from Brooklyn. And I was like going crazy, Ned Vizzini, you're comparing me to Ned Vizzini? And she's like looking scared at this point because I'm getting so excited about this, and she didn't understand why, and I had to explain why. And sadly, he ended up passing away a few years ago too. He never got to see the musical that was put out for him, but it's a wonderful musical, and I went with my husband a few years ago. We saw it for our anniversary, and it was nice because I was able to think of him, and I was also able to think of her while we were watching this. So she always kind of comes up in unexpected places, and it sort of feels like she's always there, and this was an example of that. Now, the next two movements that I'm going to be playing are from a piece that's called The Suite for Flute and Jazz Piano, written by Claude Bowling. And when I was in junior high school, I saw Herbie Mann perform. He was a well-known jazz flautist, and I decided that I wanted to become a jazz flautist too, but my high school band teacher at the time, his name was Mr. Moyer, I will name drop him, he told me, oh no, there's no such thing as jazz flutes. And I'm like, but I just saw a jazz flute perform. I saw this with my own eyes. And he's like, no, if you want to be in the jazz band, you need to play the saxophone. So I'm like, fine, I guess I'm learning the saxophone. So that's how I became a tenor sax player, mainly because a teacher told me no. But my flute teacher, her name was Barbara Norcoth. She was wonderful, and that's who I had throughout high school. She didn't tell me no, and when I told her that I was interested in playing jazz flute, she introduced me to Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson. If you haven't listened to them, please listen. We saw them live in Forest Hills a few years ago. They're incredible. And she also suggested that I start out playing this Claude Bowling piece. And my mom played piano, so I played it with her. And this is something that I've been working on and off since high school, so about 30 years at this point. And Toshiko is insane enough to play a couple of movements with me. So we're going to entertain you today with 2 movements from Claude Bowling. And the first one is called Sentimental. Swan's family. There are a lot of you here. Really appreciate it. I'm glad that we've had these up these past few years. And also, let's give it up for Toshiko. Toshiko made this piece for me today that I'm wearing. It has the French colors on it in honor of today's concert. So she's also an artist in addition to being a wonderful musician. And now the final piece we're doing is another piece from Claude Bowling from the same movement. This is a much more jazzy piece, and it's called Veloce.
long 2 years. For those who don't know me, I'm Celeste Chow. I'm the Community Concert Director and part of the board for Friends of Maple Grove, along with Naomi. And who is new here to Maple Grove? Very nice. Thank you so much. So for those who are new to here, our mission is to bring alive those who have passed away that we have the honor of taking care of permanently. And through concerts, workshops, lectures, we honor the people who are here. And thank you for doing such an amazing job.
Thank you.
I just wanted a day off, so I let you do everything.
And it's a hard job, that's what I learned. Rallying everybody, planning rehearsals, it's a lot of work. And she has a full-time job on top of that.
So all I had to do today was to show up and enjoy the concert.
But she brought snacks.
So we have a reception downstairs, and Naomi has put together a beautiful glass exhibit. It's actually our first one here at Maple Grove. So we have the reception and have some light snacks, meet the musicians, and thank you so much for coming.